Hey everybody, what's up? This is Rényi from the Electric B2B Show and founder of Klear. Welcome to this episode of the Electric B2B Show. And what we're going to be talking about today is the ONE GTM Motion that is going to take your company to the tens of millions of ARR. So the crux of what we're going to be talking about today and what I want to give you a process for is to find one go-to-market motion that you can just scale the crap out of down the line. And you can grow that one motion to tens of millions of ARR and then slowly add nuance and more things onto it. Okay, because what ends up happening with a lot of companies is rather than focusing in on one thing, what they do is they start to dive into different channels and strategies and trying new things because there's an assumption in leadership, in marketers, in sales that the more you do, the more types of things you do, the better. But life doesn't work that way. And it seems that successful companies are doubling down on very few things, and they do those extremely efficiently, and that's how they grow beyond 10, beyond 15, beyond $20 million a year. So what I want to show you today is the process that is going to help you find this, and it's going to help you brainstorm and plan your way through to getting a plan that is actionable, that can take you from being spread in 97 different places to focusing in on one key motion that matters. It's going to be a lot less stress, and it's going to be a lot more fun. It's going to be a lot more fruitful and way more productive. Okay? So with that out of the way, I just want to do the mercifully brief introduction about Klear B2B, which is the company I founded, and me. I'm Rényi. And probably the fanciest thing that has happened to us is one of our clients with whom we've worked for 2 years hit spot number 91 on the Financial Times list of the 1,000 fastest growing European companies. So yay, that was a nice achievement. And we might know one another from LinkedIn because on LinkedIn, what we do is we publish most of the internal documents, processes, SOPs, resources that we do for ourselves internally. And some of these go viral, like the one you see over here, which got quite a few views and engagements and whatnot. So we publish these things because we hope you make good use of them, and that it makes us feel good because we get so much great feedback from them. Okay, that's it. And what we want to dive into is what are the big shifts going on right now. What you see over here is the picture. It's a mini infographic posted by a gentleman named Kyle Poyar, and he is a partner at OpenView, which is a pretty reputable venture capitalist firm. And what he is seeing after meeting hundreds of companies and working with dozens is that there's a shift in the way startups go to market. And he outlined it here in the old startup playbook. What you see on the left side is that you used to have building a minimum viable product, which had a bunch of bugs, but you wanted to get stuff out as fast as possible and do that with a big bang and a lot of budget. So you've got big events, you've got PR, you've got heavy outbound. And, as you are supposed to grow by adding more sales reps and goaling marketing on volume of leads and MQLs that they produce, and you are advised to raise money as fast as possible so that you can add even more fuel to the fire and even more people and even more PR and even more media and just more. Now, that is starting to not work because of the shifts going on in the marketplace, right? So that funding has been down for the past year and a half or two. The old outbound playbook is starting to not work. AI is turning everything on its head. So because of all these things, the go-to-market reality is changing for companies that are, every SaaS company basically out there. Okay, so what is happening, what Kyle found, is that there's a new playbook emerging. And what's the new playbook about? Well, it's about building a much better, a remarkable product, because it's not enough anymore to build something that is better than paper or pencil or Excel. Because in today's world, your SaaS product is competing against other good software products. You want to build a story right out of the gate and use storytelling to attract your audience and lead with a great product with a lot of product-led growth components built in that hook the user and retain the user. And here's an important thing. Product market fit is no longer considered to be, getting a few clients who pay for your product. Now it's about actually getting clients and retaining them, okay? So you are considered to have found product market fit when you can not only sell your thing, but actually keep the customers and create impact with them, okay? So the bar is higher, obviously, as you can see. But look at number 7, embrace a unified GTM, okay? So as opposed to building a lead generation machine with marketing, like back in the old school days of startup life, you now want to have a unified team of sales, marketing, product, customer success that works in a much more lean, much more efficient way, leveraging AI. And look at this, the last one, number 8. It's about maintaining capital optionality. So you are no longer advised to go for funding at all costs. And you might have seen a guy on LinkedIn by the name of Adam Robinson, who's a big proponent of this, and he has been scaling their companies to 25 million in ARR. And we'll get back to Adam Robinson because we're going to use him in an example of ours. Okay, so this is how the world is changing. Besides the more obvious things like outbound dying and prospects being flooded with cold email and not responding to anything. So this is a more subtle shift that is less obvious, and it calls for new approaches in go-to-market. Okay, but let's define go-to-market first. What is a go-to-market motion? Because people mean a bunch of things. They call channel. They confuse go-to-market motions with channels. So they will think, okay, SEO is a way to go to market. No, go to market is basically taking your product, selling it, and creating impact for your customers. So if you want to put it in another way, it's taking your product to market and selling and keeping your customers. Okay, there are better definitions than this, but for our purposes, today it's good enough. Because what we want to talk about is the only 5 go-to-market motions. And you'll see what I mean. So inbound-led, outbound, product-led, partner/channel-led, and ecosystem-led. And I'll quickly define each of these, okay? Inbound is partner and channel-led is when you have distributors reselling your stuff. And many companies, many SaaS companies are looking to partner-led growth because they are assuming that they can save the time and save the effort of actually figuring out how to sell their product, okay? We're not going to get into this, but finding partners is really an option when you have figured out go to market yourself, because no one is going to figure out how to sell your stuff for you. And if they do, then you'll be at a disadvantage in the long run. Okay, so these are the 5 GTM motions. Obviously, there's a lot of overlap and they're not mutually exclusive. But what we're talking about today is for a certain type of SaaS companies, of B2B technology companies, rather than trying to add a lot of these motions prematurely, you want to focus on finding one and perfecting that. Take a look at this figure. What you have here is when a company is at 0 and before hitting product market fit or approximately $1 million in yearly revenue, what they're doing is they're searching for the right GTM motion. So what's going to happen here is that you'll have founder-led growth, and the founder and the non-existent team or the very tiny team is going to start throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. And they're just going to do everything in their capacity in a random way, in an unstructured way, to get money and get new customers. Okay, so the founder is going to be hopping on planes, going to conferences, selling on the street corner, what have you. They're going to be trying a bunch of things just so that they find something that actually works and that brings in customers. Now, once you approach $1 million, give and take, okay, and this is going to be different for everybody, but once you have product market fit, so you're able to actually sell and retain customers, then hopefully what's going to happen is that all these bunch of activities are going to narrow and be fewer in number, because you're just going to get rid of the stuff that doesn't work or isn't efficient, and you're going to focus on the one thing, on the one motion that you can really build up and scale. Because right here, you have a very small team. Once you've found product market fit, your sales and marketing teams are going to be teeny tiny, okay? Just a couple of marketers on board. And what's the best thing to do here is to focus on one motion and scale and improve and optimize the hell out of it. What do most companies do? They get their little marketing team and the little sales team, and the sales team starts flooding the marketing team with a bunch of requests, and the marketing team wants to prove themselves, so they start doing 25 different things, and they end up not coming out of this wide range of activities that is really going to end up, spreading themselves thin. So what you want to do in this range, in this no man's land, before you get to 10 million, is really optimize one motion. Now, what happens at around 10 million, where you're able to scale and optimize the motion, and you will have grown your team over here, okay? So by the time you're approaching 10 million, you will probably have several marketers and maybe a dozen salespeople. Then you'll be able to take the learnings and start a new marketing motion, a new GTM motion, okay? Because building a GTM motion takes a bunch of time. So this is at least 12, 18, 24 months. It can even be longer than that, okay? So experimenting, optimizing, getting it right, and then scaling it takes time. But by the time you're over here, you've got the funds and you've got the team size to really go for something that is more and just add a couple of more motions to what you're already doing. Okay. Now, here's a slightly different way of looking at things. Okay. So over here in the beginning, what you have is founder-led sales, and before product market fit, you're basically doing experiments, structured and unstructured experiments. In no man's land, once you've hit product market fit, which can be, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, it doesn't really matter. That's why I grade out these numbers. But what you've got is scaling the organization and tweaking, improving, optimizing, and scaling your one GTM motion. And once you've hit GTM fit, once you're like, okay, we know that this system can scale. We know we can get new customers. We can obviously keep them as well. Then it's time to launch a new GTM motion. And by the way, this, upon finding GTM fit, is where companies, if they choose to, they often go for a new round of funding. Because what's going to happen over here is you're talking to investors and you're going to be like, okay, buddy, we need some money. And they're going to be like, okay, what are you doing? Well, we found a motion where we can just print new customers, basically. Okay, so we've got a machine where we put in $1 and $2.50 come out the other end. And here it is. Here's what we've got. Here's how we do it. Here's the documentation. Here are the numbers, the dashboards, and everything. Look, now we just need to put oil on this fire and make it blast off. And the investors are going to be like, okay, that's pretty good. And interestingly enough, when you do get to this point, so you do have the one GTM motion that is getting you new customers at scale, whether it be high ticket clients with account-based marketing or lower ticket clients for a PLG motion. But when you have this, you have what we talked about here, capital optionality, because at this point you can fund much of your growth and operations, and you are not going to be so reliant on external funding. Now, sadly, this usually is not the case, but we're here to change that, okay? So hopefully after doing this little exercise that's coming up in a few minutes, you're going to be among the companies who is able to take more control of your destiny because you are able to create that client-making machine, as old school as that sounds and as weird as that sounds, okay? But what companies often mess up is that they don't have this machine, but they start running out of money when they're over here in no man's land. And that's a problem because the investor's coming and they're going to be like, okay, so why do you need more money? And the company's going to be like, well, we want to get more customers. We want to hire more salespeople, and we want to spend more on advertising. And they're going to be like, okay, what's stopping you from spending a bunch of money on new sales hires and advertising? And the obvious answer to that is, well, what's stopping us is that we haven't found a system. We don't have a system that works that is getting clients at a profitable or at an acceptable rate. Because if we did, it would be the easiest investment in the world, right? Here's the machine that is taking $1 and giving you $2.50, $3, whatever back. That's the easiest thing. That's the no-brainer funding. But when you don't have that, you are at a severe disadvantage when asking for money. Right. So what do we mean by just one GTM motion? Does it mean you stop doing everything else in the world? No. By focusing on one thing, what we have found is that you're putting 80% of your resources, your time, your money, and your everything else, 80% of that into optimizing that one motion. And by the way, we're going to take a look at some examples for these motions so that you actually get to understand what we talk about. But you leave about 20% for other table stakes things, right? So maybe showing up at trade shows, doing PR, maybe that's important. It's not going to win the day, but you still want some resources, money, and whatever for that. And same thing for experiments. I'm a huge fan of constant experimentation because you want to keep your team on the edge. You want to, build an innovative culture where you're constantly looking for new things. That's a very healthy way to run an organization regardless of the department. And it's true for the growth and GTM teams as well. So you always want to be testing new stuff because remember, when you get here, when you get over here, you're going to have to start building new motions. And if you've built a culture of experimentation and constant testing, then it's going to be way faster and way easier because you're going to have these processes and systems in place as well. Okay. So keep 20% of your resources as a rule of thumb. Okay. So obviously nothing is exact here. Math is not an exact science, as one of my mentors always says. Okay. So, these aren't exact figures, but you want to keep these proportions. So keep 20% for experimentation and other stuff. Now, how is this thing working for companies that you might know? And we got a couple of people here. The guy on the left is who we talked about in the beginning of this class, Adam Robinson with retention.com and R2B. What is his ONE GTM motion? His ONE GTM motion is what he calls inbound-led outbound, which is basically classical inbound, where he is creating a ton of content, building authority, building a huge audience on LinkedIn, and using that to drive traffic to their website, r2b.com and retention.com. And using motions, in part their own software and in part other stuff, they are reaching out and activating the companies who it makes sense to reach out to and activate. Okay, so it's creating a bunch of really high quality, very useful content on LinkedIn and then activating the companies who show interest. Okay, the simplest thing in the world to explain, the hardest thing probably to execute, but this ONE GTM motion is getting him to $24 million annual run rate currently. So it's crazy. And obviously, they're probably adding more motions at this point because it makes sense to after a while. But you can see that this one motion, focusing and doubling down on that. So what he's saying in his material is that 80% of what he does is creating content. And doubling down on this has got them to very nice heights. Okay, so the second guy you see over here is Nathan Barry, the founder of ConvertKit. What was his ONE GTM motion that got him to around $4 or $5 million? It was outbound. His tool is a replacement for MailChimp. What he did all day and all night long until he got to $4 or $5 million per year is reach out to MailChimp users, especially bloggers, and tell them, hey, I've got this thing that fixes MailChimp's top 3 problems. 1, 2, 3. You probably want to take a look at it. Let's jump on a call. And as you can imagine, that is totally unscalable, but it totally works. So it doesn't really matter if it's unscalable. You'll figure out how to scale it later. But the thing is doubling down and perfecting that. So, he did that online with cold email. He went to conferences. He went, talked to people wherever he could in his target audience and was obsessed about talking to people, showing them the product. And he found several channels to do that, and that took him to some very nice levels of success. Okay, the Third company I wanted to talk about is this little company called Klear that you might have heard of. Okay, Klear is, what do you call it? An AI outbound automation tool. They're now worth $500 million. And the one thing that got him to very nice heights, I'm not sure how much they're doing, but it's well into the millions of run rate annually. And what they're doing is, number one, they have an amazing product. Okay, so a good product is table stakes, but Klear really has a good product that is easy to use. It's new. It hasn't been copied yet. And agencies and freelancers are all over it. So Klear realized this and understood this. And so they built a very solid partner program as well as a community. Okay, and the two sort of go hand in hand. So they have a Slack channel with a community of creators and users, and they have a partner program. So the two sort of intertwine. So call that the partner-led motion. Okay, and this partner-led motion, by the way, is what got HubSpot to like very, very high places and massive amounts of revenue. People usually equate HubSpot's success to inbound marketing, but I think that's wrong because HubSpot was popularizing inbound marketing. They created the term. But what really got them the revenue is the partner program, okay? So on the one hand, they were creating some amazing content that hooked all of the small and medium businesses in the world and had them try HubSpot. That's one thing. But the way they were able to really capitalize on this, because their product is somewhat complex, is to get a bunch of partners on board. And the partners loved it because the product is easy to sell thanks to all the content and inbound marketing that HubSpot was doing. Also, they needed the partners to implement the software. So it was a very nice symbiosis. So I would call that's like actually two major GTM motions that go hand in hand. They had the inbound led stuff that probably got him or would have gotten them good results anyway. But adding the partner motion just really helped them scale exponentially. Okay. But so Klear is pretty much on that same trajectory. They're using that same mechanism. All right. If you want to go down this path, what is it that you need to start doing? Okay, so now we're going to get into the workshop part of things. If you've made it to this point and you're like, okay, I want to nail that one GTM motion because I know that I'm at product market fit, a couple of $1 million, and I know if I get this right and put it into action, that's going to take me to the tens of millions of dollars. So what do you need to do? Well, what's in your way is that you're probably dependent on founder-led sales, okay? So what founder-led sales looks like is that you've got the superhero dude or gal in the middle, and they do 90% of the work and get 98% of the results. Everything else is 2%. And everything else is viewed as separate siloed activities. So you have SEO, you have videos, you may be doing a podcast, you may have other salespeople helping out, you may have a partner program, whatever. You have a bunch of things going on, but it's really all centered around one guy. What's the problem with that? When you're trying to step away from that, because remember, you are over here with the founder, with them and everybody else doing a million things, and you're trying to step away from them to put all your effort into one super motion. What's really stopping you at this point is that this sort of thinking and this sort of setup creates the wrong systems, because what it leads to is a channel-focused mindset where you have a bunch of channels working side by side, somewhat connected, but they're pretty much in silos, okay? So we're not even talking about sales and marketing and customer success alignment. We're talking about aligning all the marketing channels first and marketing activities. But that's the problem, that this thinking creates siloed operations. So that's how you end up with plans like this. You see, like this is a typical marketing plan, which has an SEO plan, a social media plan, a partner marketing plan, a paid marketing plan. What's wrong with this? What's wrong with this setup? I'll tell you, it's that there's a huge overlap between these channels in reality. And here you're just defining activities, whereas getting clients is actually a process. Okay? So here you're focusing on activities and channels, whereas getting clients is actually a process or a stream of processes or a group of processes. Okay? So this is wrong. don't do marketing planning like this. Why? Because your customer journey is a lot more like this. It's wacko. It's almost random, I would say. And there's a bunch of different activities going on at the same time, especially when you add your company's activities and you lay it on top of it. It looks very random and it's totally nonlinear. But the good news is that it does have a linear component, okay? And the fact that people are taking a path that zigzags back and forth is secondary. What's really important for you is that there are phases which the buyer has to go through, okay? So according to Gartner and a lot of smart people, B2B companies start with becoming aware of a problem and then identifying the problem. Then they're exploring different solutions for it. Then they need to build the requirements. Okay, so we have the couple of solutions on the table. What is it that we need to be basing our decision upon? And then they need to select the supplier, obviously. Okay, so that's the first half of the buyer journey. And these phases, they are somewhat consequential. They follow one another. Okay, so regardless of the buyer actually dropping out and coming back in and going back and forth, these are phases that are somewhat linear. And the key is to understand in GTM is if you want your system to work, you've got to have processes that keep the inertia, that have people moving down, that have companies moving down this path, regardless of how they zigzag. You still want to aid them and guide them to move forward, to actually doing business with you. Okay? So when you start planning, you've got to keep this in mind. And if you truly want to be buyer-centric, which is the coolest thing in the world, not just the coolest sounding thing in the world, but it's also the most beneficial and most profitable way to go to market. If you want to be buyer-centric, you're going to base everything around what your buyers are actually doing or what they are looking to do, okay, rather than force them into something else. So here is how we do this. This is a better structure for GTM. This is the pre-sale phase, okay, because I'm just going to give you a sneak peek at this. If you're familiar with the winning by design framework and the bow tie model, you will know that most of the profit is made on the back end. So this is the pre-sale phase, but what we're actually looking at is the full buyer journey, which has the pre-sale phase and then the post-sale phase. Okay, but to make things simple, and because everybody is obsessed with getting new customers, and that's the only part that they care about, we're just going to keep it simple and talk about the pre-sale phase. So here it is. Here are all the phases that the buyer needs to go through that we got from Gartner. You'll probably want to define this for your market, for your buyers, for your buyer journey. But if you're in B2B technology, it's probably going to be very similar to this. Okay, what's the second thing you do? After you've gotten everybody in the room, from customer success, from sales, from marketing, from product, if you're a smaller company, you even want to have the founder for this exercise, just so that you are aligned on everything that you're creating. The next step you want to do is figure out what is our goal. So what are some of the milestones that we need to be hitting as we guide the customer, as we guide the buyer down this journey to the right? Okay, so you'll probably want to figure out who you want to target in the first place. So identifying the account. Once you've identified the account, you somehow want to create engagement, generate demand, get them to look at your stuff. Then once they're looking at your stuff, you obviously want them interested, and then you want them to go to a demo or a discovery call, and then obviously you want to win the deal. And so then half the job is done. All you have to do is retain them. But if you're setting up your CRM the smart way, what you're going to do is you're going to set up your CRM stages exactly like this, exactly according to the goals that you need to be hitting as you are going down the buyer journey with your prospect, okay? Now, the cool thing that the winning by design methodology gives you is it gives you the metrics, okay? So this helps you figure out what you want to measure. And this is a much deeper topic, but when you're brainstorming this with your team, all you'll have to be aware of is what are the key metrics that you'll need to figure out that will help you understand how you're doing and how you're progressing. Okay, and needless to say, you need very precise definition for what a marketing qualified account is, what a sales qualified account is, so that there's no question around that. And So you figure out what these measuring points are, how you'll measure them, and you can put those in your CRM, and it's going to be a lot more straightforward. Okay? And now, skipping ahead a couple of steps, because we talked about the fact that the way you scale your company is you create motions that take your buyers through the journey. Now, rather than doing what most companies do, most companies who think like this, rather than starting to brainstorm, okay, how do we do SEO to fulfill these things? What do we do on social media? No, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to be thinking in processes in terms of motions, okay? So what you're going to do, and we're skipping a few steps here, is you're going to figure out what programs do we need to put in place in order to move the buyer down this journey. Okay, so obviously to identify the account and get engagement and to generate interest, that can be one program. Now for engaged prospects to, who don't want to talk to us right away, we'll have another program and a third and a fourth and whatnot. Be careful. You don't want to have too many programs. You have a small team. And as we said, you'll eventually want to focus in on just one motion. And we're going to get to that soon, okay? But as I said, we're going to give you examples on what these motions look like. So a GTM motion, by our definition, is, for example, this. So let's say you have this green little thing, what we call program one, which would be a content, webinar, content hub, and outreach sequence. Okay, so this would be a motion. And when you're building this, the process is that you will probably identify once you're over here that, hey, we've been doing webinars in this phase, and we've been doing content because our founder is really kick-ass on LinkedIn. So, they get a lot of engagement, and then we can get people on webinars, and then we can somehow sell them. So this is the realization. And this is how you're formalizing it. You're coming over here and you're putting in the little steps, okay? So first you have LinkedIn, then you have the webinar, then let's say you lead the buyer to a content hub, and then sales reaches out to the appropriate prospects. Okay, so that's gonna be one motion. But obviously, you're not going to be able to get that much volume from LinkedIn, so you'll figure out other traffic sources that come here. Or you might not be able to do that many webinars, so you're going to think, okay, maybe we can go for a video series and see if we get the same results or if we get acceptable results. Okay, so this is the process of building and then slowly optimizing and scaling your ONE GTM motion. Okay, because at the end of the day, you can have a lot of moving parts in here, but it's all going to follow this same logic, this same motion that you're taking an unaware buyer, engaging them, getting them to consume your content, and finding a way to track their engagement so that your sales team can reach out if they don't raise their hands. Okay, so that's going to be one motion, for example. So that's what you want to find and then put 80% of your effort into. Okay, and just to pin this down, here's the mindset shift that's needed again. So we can't talk enough about this. What's wrong with the world today is that people think that getting B2B clients requires a set of coordinated activities. But these coordinated activities end up being silos and not really serving one client-centric, buyer-centric motion. So the mindset shift you need is that you want to get clients through processes by helping them go down the buyer journey. Okay, that's the important mindset shift. Now, I promised that I'm going to help you go through this thing, and I did give away the fact that over here, we skipped a couple of steps, okay? So in reality, when we're doing planning, we don't jump from metrics straight to programs. We want to really hone in on what needs to be happening in the minds of the buyers in order to buy from us, okay? So the exercise we go through is one using this. Okay, so this is our better structure for GTM. And what you've seen so far is this part, right? What buyer does and our goals and what to measure. But there are a couple things before we go to programs, and I want to talk to this, okay? So one way to build programs that really work is to is to get super clear on what needs to happen in the understanding, in the minds, in the hearts of your buyer personas who are buying from you. Okay, so here we have three categories you'll see. We have what the buyer needs to learn, what their common objections are, and what they actually need to inherently believe to buy from us. Because if you think about it, if the buyer knows everything that they need to buy from you, if you've handled all their objections and they inherently believe your stuff, your point of view, and your way of thinking, then there's very little in the way of them buying. Okay, so that's why this step is so important. And that's why it takes an expert to really brainstorm the process through this. Okay, so what we want to start doing is somewhat related to these stages, but not necessarily. We're going to list out all the things that the buyer needs to learn. And customer success and sales are going to be a huge help in this. And keep in mind that you're doing this exercise together, right? Okay, so I'm going to walk you through the example or some of the examples that we did for our company, Klear B2B, which is a go-to-market consultancy and agency. Okay, so we pinpointed. I hate that word, pinpointed. I don't know why I said pinpointed. Okay, so we figured out what the buyer needs to learn is number one, that random acts of marketing lead to crap, doom spiral, burnout. Okay. The other thing that is that solid growth is the result of programs and not random actions. Okay. So this is obviously what we talked about in this little episode here. So rather than doing programs, you need to be, or rather than doing actions, siloed actions, you need to be doing programs. Okay. Another thing is that what they need to understand is there are a few components, few assets that almost every GTM plan needs that need to be built. And the fact that GTM is a cross-team challenge. And because a lot of founders think that, okay, we just, need some strong sales supported by marketing, but sales is going to charge and lead the way, which is just not the way that the world works any longer. Okay. And another thing is video content is the way to go. Video first content. That's how we create everything. So they need to learn and understand these. And then there are some legit objections that come along the way. Like, hey, we just need to find a great salesperson with a Rolodex and they'll take care of everything. Okay. That's a common objection that we face. And then we explain people in our content, in our meetings that, hey, it's just not the way the world works anymore. Okay, and then there's this won't work for us, we're different objection. And if we don't handle these, there's almost no way that they're going to work with us. Okay, so here's the third one. Some companies will say that we don't have an in-house subject matter expert to create content, so we can't create content at scale. And we handle this objection by giving them the process. Okay, here's how a journalist-like marketer, such as our company, can talk to one subject matter expert. You have at least one subject matter expert in your company. You've got to. And here's how we pick their brains and create content on an ongoing basis. And if they don't get that, if they don't understand that, we're not going to work together. Okay, it's as simple as that. And now this is the most fun part. These are the inherent beliefs. Okay, here we're getting into the subconscious. We're getting into the qualitative. We're getting into stuff that is usually stronger than logic. And if we can get our buyers, as they're progressing through our buyer journey, to subscribe to these beliefs, then it's going to be a very good relationship. Okay, it doesn't necessarily need to happen, but the sale and the cooperation is going to be like way better if they subscribe to some of these or most of these beliefs. Okay, like one belief that you can't inherently prove, but it's sort of a thing that makes sense and is logical, is that building know, like, and trust in the marketplace wins the day. Okay, so you can point to a bunch of companies who have it relatively easy, seemingly easy, because they have built know, like, and trust in the marketplace. But you can find examples of the opposite as well. So that's why this is more of a belief than a fact. But related to this is that the fastest way to build know, like, and trust is to build awesome content. Okay, so if our prospect subscribes to these beliefs, that's a very good sign for us, because we're going to understand one another and they're going to understand everything else that we do a lot more easily. Okay, and here's the one that we've been talking about all day right now, that nailing a single GTM motion will take us to tens of millions of dollars. And that's important because a lot of times what the founder or the GTM leader is always gravitating towards is adding more activities, more people, more whatnot, and more stuff, more bloat, more tech. And if we can get them out of this mindset and get them to focus in on one thing and direct their thinking and attention and focus in the direction of the one GTM motion, then it's going to be a win-win for both of us. Okay, so you will want to do this exercise, and it doesn't hurt if you get a partner who can lead the way, who can lead this brainstorming exercise. And if you go through this, you're really going to narrow in on the types of programs and what these programs need to be doing, because you'll have a map of what needs to happen in the mind of your buyer. Okay, that's why this is so beautiful. But we're not jumping to programs just yet, because we've got the buying committee to take care of. Because you're selling high-ticket products, high-ticket offers, what's actually happening is that you're not selling to individuals, but you're selling to multiple people. So on the one hand, you have the champion, you have an influencer, you have a decision maker, you have blockers, and you have all sorts of people that show up at various times in the buyer journey, and you just want to get clear on when they are present so that you can tailor your programs and your content accordingly. Okay? And so once you have all these things mapped out, that's when you can go to programs and you'll figure out, okay, we've done something like this and we're sort of good at it. So let's see how we can operationalize it and formalize the process. And then once you've outlined a few programs, then you'll want to go to their components and then figure out which components you want to start with. Okay? So that pretty much concludes most of this process. There's a bit more to it. I'm happy to talk about it to you if you're interested. If you want to work with our company to lead you through this, to avoid the booby traps and the rabbit holes and all the dead ends that companies usually go down, talk to us. You know where to reach us. Thank you so much for your attention. Share this recording, this episode internally, externally, wherever. Get in touch with us for feedback, and thanks a lot. Bye-bye.